Polipede works here, back like we never left, with chapter 1083 of One Piece, entitled The Truth About That Day. We have a cover art again in which we see Doflamingo in a very interesting and rare light as he is providing a bandage to a baby bird, of which he has put inside his coat to act like a nest. I like this one. I really do, because you don't really see Doflamingo expressing kindness this often. But when you do, it's often with birds, because there was the other one where he allowed a actual flamingo to wear his sunglasses. And he was very jazzed about it because he had his hands over his eyes laughing about it. So that's very funny. That's very funny. But yes, we cut back to the Kamabaka Kingdom. Also, I would like to point out, as always, we don't go beat by beat when covering these chapters. I just cover what I find interesting. So, of course, we know that Sabo is alive, and he explains that he actually accomplished the 3 objectives that he and the boys set out to do, which was 1, declare war by taking down the symbol of the Celestial Dragons. Very much how Soki King shot down the flag of the world government back in the day during Enies Lobby. And then they attacked the food supply and rescued Kuma. So they ended up accomplishing all 3 of their goals. What's so interesting about the conversation that Sabo was having with Dragon and Ivankov is that I had a conversation with a friend almost a year ago about how Ivankov does not seem like a good guy. And we get a little bit of that here, because as they're talking, Ivankov kind of blurts out in a fit of maniacal rage and laughter saying, "But we'll see how they like living under siege. They'll finally get a taste of what it is to live in poverty and go hungry." Bro, what in the world, Ivankov? Like, I get where he's coming from. The Celestial Dragons are evil, I get that, but he's really not a great character in this moment. He seems super evil to me. I don't know, maybe that's just me over exaggerating. And then he goes on to celebrate because he does this whole hee-haw laugh. I don't know. And then Dragon just co-signs on it, and he's like, "Oh, that's why I call a result. We may not be able to cut off all their supplies, but squeezing them is good because they're struggling." Like, this is a weird conversation. The people that they do have in their employ, the unfortunates, do still need to sustain themselves off the morsels that the Celestial Dragons find fit to feed them. So that's just a weird situation. Maybe I'm not understanding it, but that just seems weird to me. And also, we are introduced to the Holy Knights that were mentioned a little bit farther back, I think. I forgot the chapter they were mentioned in, but they were mentioned before. And when spoilers were out for this chapter, a lot of people were talking about the silhouette in the middle of this collage of guys here. People were saying it looks like Shanks. I'm going to say this. With Shanks, though, there are a lot of weird gray points in his history. Like, for example, when he's a kid, versus to where when he actually forms his crew. Like, what happened between him and Buggy talking like they were in chapter 1082 up until he starts to recruit like Ben Beckman and the boys. That's just a weird void of time that has not been filled yet. So I will say with Shanks, he's a very strange character because he's been able to do things and enact reactions that other characters simply don't cause. Like stopping wars by showing up, intercepting Kaido with King with ease, having an audience with the 5 elders. There's just a lot of weird stuff about Shanks. I recently did a video too about how it's kind of weird that his Jolly Roger just symbolizes his defeat or his sort of mark of defeat against Teach when Teach was a no-name pirate with a bounty of 0. I just find that weird that his Jolly Roger, the thing that represents his entire organization, symbolizes a scar he got from somebody who really wasn't a big deal back in the day at that time. Because remember, Teach is the only character in the series who had a canonical bounty of actually 0. It's not that he didn't have a bounty. His bounty was 0, and this is brought up in Thriller Bark when Moria and Kuma have that conversation about him. So I just find that weird about Shanks. There's a lot of weird stuff about Shanks. Also, the whole human fruit model Nika thing that we have to talk about now. Like, did he know the nature of that fruit? Did he know the lie regarding that fruit? There's just a lot of grayness and voids when it comes to Shanks and what he knows and may not know. So I'm unsure. I will say too, though, when it comes to silhouettes of One Piece, there are malarkey. We know this several times, like when Garp talks about the Yonko back in Water 7, like after Enies Lobby, when the crew are relaxing in Water 7, and he brings up Kaido and Big Mom. They look nothing like they do in the silhouettes that were presented at that time. So silhouettes are garbage, okay? They're just meant to present threats on the horizon. Also, if you remember way back in the day, I don't know if it was in the manga, but I know it was in the anime, during the East Blue, when the concept of the 7 warlords were brought up, none of those silhouettes look anything like the guys we got. Okay, so disregard silhouettes. Keep them in mind as a placeholder for bad dudes coming down the pipe, okay? And here's another thing that kind of makes me a bit iffy on Sabo and the boys as a whole, because they kind of flippantly talk about Cobra. They're like, oh, Cobra's a good man. He was well loved and such, but his death was kind of necessary to do the things we needed to do, which puts a bad taste in my mouth personally, because yeah, Cobra is very important. He's one of the only members of the original family who didn't ascend to celestial dragon ship and remained with his people. Yeah, he's a very rare commodity, guys. I mean, I don't understand why he's being talked about in such a flippant manner, like he doesn't matter. No, his presence matters. It's very, very odd, but it is setting up to a point where we actually find out who actually killed Cobra. It's also very interesting too. If you've been a fan of the channel, I did have a theory about how I think Lucy is Cobra's son. So that may or may not be coming down the pipe soon, because Lucy does appear again in this chapter, so we'll keep an eye out. But we flash back to a month ago when the raid started, and the Celestial Dragons are freaking out as the revolutionaries are on the siege. And then we get our boy Karasu. I have to say this, first of all, we get a devil fruit reveal of what Karasu is. And like in typical Logia fashion, Karasu is shot up with mundane ammunition. He dissipates, so we know he's a Logia, and he is the eater of the soot fruit. What's very interesting about this too is that we've seen a lot of Logia, like nearly all of them, have animal constructs, but we've never seen one talk through an animal construct, as Karasu is doing here with his weird soot crow as he's talking to one of the pirates that was enslaved by one of the celestial dragons. Another thing I want to bring up too, this was like several years ago now. Library of Ohara, Artur, commissioned a comic in which he stated that Karasu would have the tartar fruit. So I have to give it up to him because he wasn't too far off. I was far off because I had a video entitled the murder fruit, in which I was making the claim that Karasu was a unique variant of Zoan fruit user that could make a flock of animals appear. So in this case, he would be just a murder of crows. I still think that theory has some legs, but with other characters, and we'll talk about that in some videos that I will make down the pipe. But yes, he is a soot man. This is very interesting too, because he can make multiple constructs, as he makes several obelisks out of soot. He calls it obelisk soot to stab some cipher pole guys. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, soot man, Logia, very cool. But this also paints the revolutionaries as simply bad guys, because a cloud of soot looming over a city does not instill one with hope. I'm just saying they're being painted very oddly here. And then we see Lindbergh free some slaves with his laser shooter. So he's got laser guns. That's pretty cool. So he's got laser guns and freeze guns. Very inventive meek we have here. Very, very cool. And like we see here too, as Karasu's fighting Fujitora with his Crow Reckoning, he's being blown apart some more again, so that just further clarifies that he indeed is a Logia. Also, he paints his nails black, which is very on brand for him because he looks like a Marilyn Manson inspired character. So yeah. Morley is fighting Green Bull, fights are breaking out. But here's the cool part, okay? We see our CP9 boys, we see all of them, and they've all been upgraded to CP0. I'm so happy about that. We got Funkuro, we got Khalifa, we got Bluno, we got the boy Jabbar, and we got Kumadori. What's interesting about all of them is that this was confirmed in a movie that at least Bluno and Khalifa were a part of CP0. It was confirmed in film Red. So that's why I say, bruhs, pay attention to movies. You don't have to watch them all verbatim, but just keep an eye out. Keep your eyes peeled, because sometimes canonical information will just get divulged in movies. This really did start like in Strong World and has been kind of the same since. So I'm just saying, keep your eyes peeled and your ear to the ground for these things when they come out, because they'll end up being canon. I'm telling you, because here we are. We got Bluno and Khalifa confirmed point for point as CP0 members right here. So what can I say? And then we see Kuma being enslaved by Charlos and his father. Sabo's on the scene. He's got eyes on him. We see Bonnie. We see Shirahoshi. And we see Vivi yelling at Lucy based on the scene where she's bad about him not doing anything to protect Shirahoshi. And then we see Cobra in his wheelchair getting ready to meet with the 5 elders with Chaka and Pell at his back. And now we get confirmation that in this moment, he actually sent Chaka and Pell away to go find Vivi while he talks to the 5 elders. Another interesting thing, too, that I see here is that Karu is nowhere. Hattori gets his own little panel, though, which is interesting. But yeah, Karu is nowhere to be seen. So I wonder where he went in all this. But that is the end of our chapter, though. I find it super interesting that once again, movies things are confirmed. But yeah, Pell and Chaka were not there when Cobra was assassinated. So we really do have to see how all that panned out. But yeah, Lucy and Cobra are in the same chapter yet again. Basically a panel between each other, because as Lucy is talking to Vivi, Cobra is presented in the very next panel. And like kind of like far away because it's a bit of a doodle, but you know that's him. So that's just kind of weird that yet again, Cobra and Lucy are in the same chapter like they were again in chapter 0 way back when. So we'll see how that all pans out in 1084, but a very good chapter. I'm glad that we see that our CP9 boys are back. I wonder if Kumadori and Funkuro got devil fruits, because if you remember, Kumadori was the lion. His whole animal theme was being a lion, whereas Funkuro's animal theme was being a owl. So we'll see if they got an owl fruit and a lion fruit, because those aren't canonical devil fruits yet. So we'll have to see about that. We know Bluno and Khalifa and Jabra are all devil fruit users as well. I want to see if Khalifa actually got any upgrades or if she is awakened. Speaking of which, I wonder if all our known Delphi users like Kaku and Lucy have been awakened at this point, because Kaku was a early Devil Fruit adopter like Khalifa, and he really did grow in those 2 years. So with Jabra having his fruit for longer, I don't doubt that he most likely too is an awakened Zoan. The real question is, what of Khalifa and Bluno? Because they're kind of the weird ones in the bunch, because they're the only Paramecius in the group. So I wonder, what would Khalifa's awakening be? Is she much like, say, Dolphy and Katakuri? Because she kind of has the same abilities? We'll really have to see. Or is it that she just makes everything slick and slippery like she does when she touches somebody? We'll have to see about that. And Bluno's even a bigger mystery, because he's kind of like one of those weird pocket dimension Delphi users, because he can turn anything in the doors, because he could also affect people as well as the air and just objects in general, like surfaces. So yeah, that's a big wonder about what exactly would he be able to do if he were awakened. Also, what's interesting too, looking at Morley fighting Green Bull, is just the scope of what his abilities can do. Because it seems like it's kind of weird to see here, but just from Morley expressing his ability, he seems to be affecting a large city block all at once, which is a bit of a stretch for him, because we have not seen this expression of power from him at all. So that's very interesting. So yeah, I really wonder, what is his ability when it's awakened? What does it become? A lot of interesting stuff, but yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Polipede Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much. See you next time.